Why can't India be creative of the kind of amnesty schemes, if at all it is to discuss one? For instance, the kind of deal that both UK and Germany struck with Switzerland last year, which allowed for both these countries to in a sense, navigate the secrecy laws in Switzerland and yet try and pick up large chunks of tax from those accounts of their taxpayers in Switzerland. So why is it that we can't think out of the box, come up with something like this that would at present deal with the amount of money that's already stashed away before we start fixing the problem of how that money got there in the first place?
Both of those agreements are in trouble with the UK and with Germany, in part because Switzerland, Swiss banks, are taking steps to move clients' accounts out of Switzerland and into Singapore and Hong Kong, so that with the implementation of those agreements with the UK and Germany, there would in fact be relatively little money left in Switzerland on which the earnings of UK and Swiss citizens, UK and German citizens, would be reported. Both of those agreements are in trouble. I think they do not offer a model for India to follow.
Mr. Srivastav, my question to you is very simplistic. Have we done enough in this country to expand the tax base? I'm told only between 2 to 4 crore of the 120 crore Indians that live in this country in fact do pay taxes. Correct my figures if I'm wrong, but it seems to me we've not made enough progress in being able to expand the tax base.
That's right. I mean, the tax base is still very low. But then question is, mechanism is in place. I mean, the law reaches to almost all sectors. It's a question, except agriculture sector, of course. But then it's a question of enforcement. We can't expect the taxman to go to every doorstep. It has its own problems. But then now we need to ensure one that enforcement machinery, in the sense that every transaction must have a trail, and then the reporting of that transaction. And that has seen a very, very good effect in the past also, when the AIR, that information system, was introduced. Deterrence alone is the factor which can work. I mean, every case cannot be scrutinized, every taxpayer cannot be approached. The only way is to create a mechanism where it becomes more and more difficult for the people to really keep the transaction under the carpet.
Professor Vaidyanathan, you diagnosed the problem as one of no political will to in fact deal with this black money economy, maybe because several politicians themselves are accused of having their fingers, if not their fingers and their feet, in this pie. Do you think, though, that the Revenue Department, whose job it is to do so, has done enough to expand the tax base, to create a paper trail of all transactions, and if not, what more needs to be done?
I think we should be very unambiguously categorical that our Revenue Department is under the ministry, and our politicians do have a large stake in this. We have 5 concrete cases. I wish these are taken to its logical end. We have Bofors, we have Hassan Ali, we have Madhukoda, we have CWG, and we have very recently the Maharashtra, Kripa Singh. All of them lead to the tax havens. All of them are at various stages of being investigated. Let us be very clear, if these cases are taken to its logical conclusion and severe punishment is meted out, then a credibility will be there for the system.
Raymond Baker, in all the work that GFR has done regarding India, what are some of the weaknesses or the flaws that you see to curb the flow of illicit money outside?
One of the things that needs to be done, in our opinion, and we have discussed this with Indian officials, is to make tax evasion a criminal offense. The Financial Action Task Force in Paris, which is the international standard setter for anti-money laundering policies, last month produced a recommendation that countries abiding by anti-money laundering standards should make tax evasion a an offense under anti-money laundering policies. It has been further suggested that the next step is to make tax evasion a criminal offense. The purpose of this is not to fill up the courts with tax evasion cases. The purpose is to change the normative behavior that exists among many people in tax evasion, and indeed the assistance that is given to tax evasion by lawyers and accountants and bankers and so forth.
Mr. Srivastava, do you think that will go any way in trying to curb this problem?
No, I fully agree with Mr. Becker. I mean, that it has to be declared as a predicate offense under Money Laundering Act. I mean, that will go a long way. Unless you have the strict laws and strict enforcement, I mean, we are.
But you keep saying strict enforcement. That enforcement has to happen by the department. The department has to be able to identify cases of evasion, go after them, create enough evidence, prosecute a case, and only then, in fact, jail these criminals, if you want to call them that. The department hasn't been able to do so in all these years, even though the offense is not one that is criminal.
At domestic level, yes, but at cross-border levels, where the transaction has a trail outside India, I mean, not much headway has been made, but then there are already these cases which Mr. Vaidyanathan pointed out, they are still under investigation. And then the misuse of the corporate structure has been really an issue, and that needs to be addressed. That's how corporate structures are being used in and outside the country for laundering of these kinds of money.
For a country that's desperate to be able to raise revenue, don't you think that the politicians, despite the prevailing environment, might feel inclined towards saying, well, at least in the short term, let's find a scheme that will bring some of the money back because we desperately need the money?
I am not very confident, because many of these institutions like income tax, central excise, enforcement directorate, they have all been emaciated by the politicians over a long period of time. I think the political interference of these institutions must stop. They must become statutory and independent. And as Dr. Baker told, one of the important things is to bring it under money laundering. Make it a criminal offense.
All right, gentlemen, I'm at the end of my time, so I'm going to use the next minute or so asking each one of you to quickly wrap up your comments and also respond to my last question, which is, there are no short-term fixes to this. If there is one in the case of an amnesty, it is wholly undesirable. The only way to do this is hard work, the slog-overs. Raymond Baker.
What I would like to see is India taking a leadership position among the emerging market countries in the G20 to push for international standards beneficial to emerging market and developing countries. Prime Minister Singh called for one of these, automatic exchange of tax information. We've also talked about curtailing the activities of tax havens. These are important steps. India, as I've said, is big enough and powerful enough and strong enough to take the lead in calling for these kinds of changes in the international scene.
Mr. Srivastava, hard work is the only way out. There is no short-term fix to this.
Yeah, amnesty, no, yes. India, it should put pressure as it does, I mean, at G20 level and other forum, to really put pressure on tax havens, on all these countries where the outflow is.
Professor Vaidyanathan, it seems to me that we could be discussing this for the next few years with very little positive result out of it. What do? We need the money desperately.
I save your time by totally agreeing with Baker and supporting him. India must take the lead in G20, and it must lead all other emerging markets to cleanse the system. And the Financial Action Task Force has clearly enunciated what are the things which should be done, and India should take it up.
All right, gentlemen, with that, I'm going to wrap up this discussion. Thank you very much for joining me. That's a panel that's unanimously against any form of amnesty or voluntary disclosure schemes. They say it's going to be many years of hard work to be able to solve this problem to some extent, and that's what we've got to do. With that, this is the last of our pre-budget specials. Thank you very much for watching.